Today we'll be carrying on with the preaching series. Last week, Samson fabulously preached on how Simon left his fishing boat and followed Jesus for the whole of his life. He became one of the disciples and even changed his name to Peter. Jesus dramatically changed Simon's life. Today we'll also be hearing about how Jesus changed people's lives, but through healing. We'll be looking at some of the first time Jesus healed. Today we are going to be looking at the healing of a leper and a paralyzed man. I'm going to split this passage into two different sections. Luke 5:12-16, which is when Jesus heals the leper, and Luke 17-26, which is when he heals the paralyzed man. The first section, I'll be focusing on Jesus' characteristics, and the second, I'll be focusing on the characteristics of the people that Jesus impacted. So first, we'll talk about Luke 12-16. It says, while Jesus was in one of the towns, a man came along who was covered with leprosy. When he saw Jesus, he fell with his face to the ground and begged him, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said, "be clean." And immediately the leprosy left him. Then Jesus ordered him, "Don't tell anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest and offer the sacrifices that Moses commanded for your cleansing, as a testimony to them." Yet the news about him spread all the more, so that crowds of people came to hear him and to be healed of their sicknesses. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Now, back in the day when Jesus was around, if you were a leper, which means you had leprosy, you would be an outcast. You would not be able to be in contact with anyone who didn't have the disease. Now, even when someone walked up to you, you had to ring a bell and say, "Unclean, unclean." There was also no cure for the disease at the time. So they were basically rejected from the whole of society for the rest of their lives. These people not only suffered physical illnesses, but they suffered mental illnesses as they were banished from their homes in the places they lived. So I think these verses tell us a lot about Jesus and his characteristics. The first characteristic that God shows is in verse 13, when he says to the leper that he was willing to heal him. This shows the kindness of Jesus. The second point that I found from this passage is that he's mixed with the leper. The leper has been rejected from everyone else in his life as soon as he got leprosy. Jesus could have just ignored him like everyone else or walked away, but he didn't. He interacted with the leper and healed him. Another point that I found is that Jesus has the power to heal the unhealable. As I said earlier, there was no possible cure for leprosy at the time, so this was a pure miracle and was not by chance. Jesus has the greatest power of all, greater than Boris Johnson or the Queen or even your mum and dad. Unlike at the moment on the border of Ukraine, where Russia is using their power to try to get what they want, Jesus is using his power to give to others, to serve others, and to heal others.
Good point.
Jesus came to die on the cross. This is how he used his power to free us from sin. He came to set us free. In our story today, this man with leprosy experienced Jesus' power in an amazing way. Jesus came to serve people like this man, people like you and me. An example of how Jesus uses power to serve others is in John 13:1-17, when he washes his disciples' feet. The healing of this leper is just another example of how Jesus uses power to heal and serve others. So, finally, from this passage, when it talks about Jesus withdrawing to lonely places and praying, shows us that Jesus is still human. He has all the powers that God has. He is God in the human form. He needs time to rest and have some time on his own, talking to his Father in heaven. So, the second section that I'm now going on to is Luke 5:17-26. In these verses, Luke talks about Jesus healing a paralyzed man. Luke says this: "One day, Jesus was teaching, and Pharisees and teachers of the law were sitting there. They had come from every village of Galilee and from Judea and Jerusalem. And the power of the Lord was with Jesus to heal the sick. Some men came carrying a paralyzed man on a mat and tried to take him into the house to lay him before Jesus. When they could not find a way to Jesus because of the crowd, they went up onto the roof and lowered him on his mat through the tiles into the middle of the crowd, right in front of Jesus. When Jesus saw their faith, he said, "Friend, your sins are forgiven." The Pharisees and teachers of the law began thinking to themselves, "Who is this fellow who speaks blasphemy? Who can forgive sins but God alone?" Jesus knew what they were thinking and asked, "Why are you thinking these things in your hearts? Which is easier, to say, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Get up and walk'? But I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on this earth to forgive sins." So he said to the paralyzed man, "I tell you, get up, take your mat, and go home." Immediately, he stood up in front of them, took what he had been lying on, and went home praising God. Everyone was amazed and gave praise to God. They were filled with awe and said, "We have seen remarkable things today." So in the first section of this preach, I focus on the characteristics of Jesus. Now, in the second section, I'll be focusing on the people that have been impacted by Jesus and their characteristics. So first, I'll be talking about the men that were carrying the paralyzed man into the home. The first thing that I noticed was that they were really dedicated to getting this man into the house. First, there were lots of men carrying this paralyzed man, so he must have been heavy. I remember on some walks that we used to do as a family around the wells, Dad would come across some very nice pieces of oak log. Sometimes there were multiple of them just lying there. What we would do is we would carry them home, but these logs were so heavy. After a couple of minutes, I just had to reset, put it on the floor, pick it back up again, and try to hold on to it for as long as I could. This one time, I remember I had to team up with my dad to carry one massive log, because even he couldn't carry it on his own. This is just like the people holding the paralyzed man, working together, holding the paralyzed man so he wouldn't fall. Secondly, they didn't give up after going in through the front of the house. They went into the house through the roof. That's sort of the thing we've seen in a spy movie. If I were them, I would have never had the creativity to think we could go through the roof. So, the question that I want to ask you is, why did these people go to so much trouble to get this person into a house? Why do they carry this man without any machinery or horse and carriage, then lower this man through a roof of a house? Now here's the answer: to go to Jesus so he could heal the paralyzed man. They were there for no other reason but to go to Jesus. They didn't go just to say hi to him and this was their little ticket in. They didn't go for their sins to be forgiven. They didn't go They didn't go so they could be the talk of the town. They went because they believed that Jesus could heal the paralyzed man. They knew that as long as they got the man to Jesus, Jesus would heal him. We know this is true because of verse 20. Luke says, when Jesus saw their faith, he said, "Friend, your sins are forgiven." Now, these people were dedicated, faithful, and selfless. These people are a really good example of how we should live our lives. Do we have the faith to believe that Jesus can heal anyone and make that big of a difference in someone's life? So now I'm going to be talking about the Pharisees and teachers of the law. These are the bad guys in our story. These were the ones that were saying Jesus was blaspheming. They said wrong things about him. So, firstly, they were at this place where Jesus was talking, not because they wanted to listen to him, but so they could criticize and catch him out. They do not care what Jesus is doing in this house, what his ultimate goal is in this world. They just don't want him there in their city. This is because they were teaching things like the reason that everyone is suffering is because they had sinned in the past, which then when Jesus came and started teaching everyone the truth, they got annoyed. They didn't like it. Well, they were just annoyed that Jesus was taking their spotlight. It used to be all about them, but then Jesus started teaching people the truth that he can forgive sins and that they were wrong. So because of this, they wanted to find any little thing that they could pick up on and say something bad about. In this case, it was when Jesus said, "Your sins are forgiven." They thought, "Who is this fellow who speaks blasphemy?" This says to us that it's easy to think bad stuff about other people. And if you're jealous or annoyed about something, don't go on and on about it and find the teeniest thing you can do to get them in trouble. Me and Noah used to do that sometimes, and after we did it, it's really not worth it. So, finally, I'm going to be talking about the crowd. Oh no, it's not. The crowd around Jesus. Obviously, in this passage, it does not give a massive amount of detail into what they do, but it does tell us something. From what it says, after the paralyzed man got healed, all the crowd celebrated and said, "We have seen remarkable things today." I'm not sure whether Luke didn't put it in, but none of the crowd was jealous that they didn't get healed or nothing cool happened to them. They were just happy for the man that did get healed. This also gives us a great example to live off of. When someone really gets what they want and none of the attention is on you, don't be jealous. Be happy for them. Can I just say, I'm so terrible at this. I remember multiple times in the past when Noah's got a present, I've said, "This isn't even a good present," or "I've got one of those already." But yeah, I'm actually trying to change now. Don't be me, be the crowd. So now we're coming to the end of my preach. These two passages tell us a lot about Jesus and the people he impacted and their characteristics. When Jesus healed the leper, he showed kindness, acceptance, and generosity by healing the leper and mixing with the totally rejected. When Jesus healed the paralyzed man, we saw the characteristics of the people carrying the paralyzed man in the crowd. These people carrying the man were dedicated, faithful, and selfless. We see this by them carrying the man onto the top of the roof, lowering him through it. The crowd wanted the best for others, and all of these characteristics we should be aiming for: kindness, acceptance, generosity, dedication, faithfulness, selflessness, and wanting the best for others. As we do so, we become more like Jesus. Thank you for listening.